the conversation to something just as important, which is anti-corruption and integrity in Nigeria. It is often said that in a corrupt society, you would not see a development as it should be, and we have also seen siphoning of government funds and the degrading nature some people are still living in, which is the testament to corruption in that area. Today we'll be talking about the anti-corruption fight. Is this government poised to fight corruption? Have they said anything when it comes to the fight against corruption? We saw that the past administration came on the backdrop of fighting corruption. If we have to do a small appraisal, how did they fare? Are there institutions put together to ensure that the fight against corruption continues and the momentum is not stopped? Well, that's what we'll be discussing, and in the studio to discuss this is Victor Agi. I just got to learn that the proper pronunciation of that surname, so I will fly with it. Victor Agi is the Public Relations Officer, Integrity Transparency, Fiscal Transparency and Integrity Watch. Thank you so much for being a part of the program this morning.
Thank you very much, Joy, for having me.
Yes. 6 months into President Tinubu's administration, where are we?
Thank you very much once again for having me. Where are we? Honestly, we are where you used to be. For some persons, especially those of us in the civil society sector, nothing has really changed from what we used to have, especially with the previous administration. Of course, for most people, the current administration is basically a continuum of what the last administration is. That is because they are the same party. So it is expected that some of the policies of the previous administration will be carried over, even though some conversations, narrative about them not being associated with what happened in the previous administration has been also ongoing. But again, the truth is that we have the same APC, we have the same policy kind of, and so we are hoping that there will be renewed hope. But in terms of the fight against corruption, we can't say for sure that something has changed from what it used to be. That is also because the president didn't really come up much about the fight against corruption during his campaign to the presidency.
Right.
There was really nothing substantial about a template in which we used to fight corruption. And so really nothing has changed in the past 6 months in terms of government efforts, to fight corruption. But for us at the civil society, the media, of course, we will not stop, talking about the fight against corruption. It is the problem that we have in the country. It is the reason why our developmental efforts are not the way they should be. It is the reason why our roads are still the way they are. It is the reason why yesterday we talked about a nationwide blackout. It was trending at some point on Twitter and all of that. So for us, I will keep talking about, the fight against corruption, because it is the soul of our society. It is the soul of our democracy. If corruption is not tackled, there won't be democracy. If corruption is not tackled, the poverty index will continue to rise and all of that. So corruption is something that we all must be interested in. And but so far, we can't say for sure what really is the trajectory of this current administration in terms of the fight against corruption. It has been, for us, business as usual. That is why we see a budget that is nothing different from what it used to be. That is why we see a budget that we are having the recurrent expenditure higher than the capital expenditure. So there is really no commitment, to cost of governance. And when the cost of governance is not cost, then there is leeway, there is loopholes for corruption, to thrive. And so really, there is really nothing that has changed in the last 6 months. We hope that going forward, there will be some things put, in shape. In terms of the fight against corruption, we are here to see that.
how important is it? I mean, when you listen to people like you in the civil society space around anti-corruption, how they keep complaining that we've not seen that body language. I mean, not necessarily the institutions; those ones are indeed there.
Yeah.
They are supposed to be charged with the mandate that they are supposed to be charged with. However, how important is the body language of the president in the fight against corruption? So many people have mentioned his May 29th speech, his inauguration speech. He did not mention corruption in it. So far, subsequently, we've not heard him necessarily speaking to corruption. How important is it for the head, the president, to have those statements on and on?
Yeah, you know, there's the popular saying by John Maxwell that everything rises and falls on leadership. And so because everything rises and falls on leadership, the fight against corruption has to come from the top as well. This is not saying that the bottom, the citizens have no role to play in this fight against corruption. But the body language, can go a long way in this fight against corruption. You remember when President Muhammad Buhari came to power, the body language was so strong, and we began to see some shift in mindset. Some persons began to, civil servants, began to go to work on time, and some persons were afraid of certain things, but there was no sustainability in that body language of the fight against corruption, and so there was a return to business as usual for most of those. So no matter how we want to see it, the president has a big role to play in this fight against corruption. He is the leader. He directs agencies. He gives direction on what agencies should do in some way. And so we expect that he should lead this fight against corruption. From top to bottom, there are corruption cases across board. And so we expect the president to be the one to champion this fight against corruption. And so it is very, very important that the president makes some of these declaration pronouncements, to deter people from acting corruptly. He needs to show leadership to some of his appointees as well. If he as a person has not come out to say that he is strong in this fight against corruption, automatically you are also saying to your appointees that you can do anything you want, not necessarily saying it before they can do whatsoever they want, but the leadership place in this fight against corruption cannot be overemphasized, because it directs policy and it directs the way the country should go. And so that is why we see some of these budget elements that we currently see in the and so there's really no political will, in quotes, from the president to fight corruption. And so we begin to see what we, as a matter of fact, what we saw in this current budget, that has been presented to the National Assembly, even worse than what we used to see.
Exactly.
And you heard things like budgeting 15 billion for the renovation or construction of, and if you ask, they said, and so we expect the president to do more than we currently, he is currently doing. But again, we don't want to pass judgment on him yet, because the budget has not been implemented, because it is at the process of implementing the budget that some of these loopholes come to play. So we hope that maybe at the course of implementation, there can be some monitoring and tracking of some of this implementation. On the side of the government needs to monitor its own expenditure. Of course, the civil society and of the media and other stakeholders are doing their part in terms of monitoring and holding government to account. But again, the government on its own must have a monitoring and evaluation template in which it monitors its own activities.
And that does not exist yet?
Well, the president has said that he has given his appointees KPI, and so he will be monitoring the activity. But we are yet to see how that works out. We don't know about the template. If you are giving that kind of template, you should make it available for people to assess what it is like, and whether you are indeed actually monitoring their activities and their performance. So we expect that some of these things will be put in place, but so far we have not seen much from him, in terms of coming out, to fight corruption. Really, we have not seen much.
When it comes to the fight against corruption, we have so many agencies. We have the EFCC, we have the Code of Conduct Bureau, we have the ICPC. We have so many agencies that are saddled with investigating even financial crimes and all of that. However, what would strengthen these agencies to properly fight corruption, whether the president's body language is left or right or not even towards it at all, because he's just one person at the end of the day.
Absolutely, he's just one person. But like I mentioned earlier, everything rises and falls on leadership. So as a president who intends to fight corruption, we also expect him to make appointment to these agencies that you just mentioned, people who are also willing to fight corruption. I am not saying that the people currently heading these agencies are not willing to fight corruption, and of course most of them are really doing some thing differently from what used to be in the past. I was with a civil society parley with the EFCC chairman last week, and some of the things that we are hearing from the EFCC are a kind of a deviation from what used to be in the past. For instance, they are not coming out to make noise about a corruption case they are pursuing until they get to some level, in terms of, getting the evidences right before coming to the media.
Right.
Before now, it used to be media trial,
yes.
Come and at the end of the day, the case go nowhere. But currently, with what the vision is shared with civil society player, which I was part of, it seemed to deviate from a departure from that trend of just going to the media and make noise. At the end of the day, nothing comes out of it. So some of them are actually doing the right thing here and there. I'm supposed to be in a parley with the ICPC chairman as well. By 10 o'clock today, we are supposed to have that meeting. So some of them are also reaching out, which is very, very important.
Very important, right?
Very, very important. So they have realized the place of civil society players, the media, in this fight against corruption, and which is something we really have to give to the current crop of leaders. Not saying that the previous ones have not been doing it, but personally, I've not been part of those kind of engagement in the past. So the citizens have a role to play in the fight against corruption, and of course civil society like us, the media, have a role to play. And if they are reaching out, it means then that there is some kind of improvement. But again, like I said, the president has a role. The body language must show that they are willing to fight corruption. His administration is willing to fight corruption. And beside what the agencies can do, which they are currently doing, of course, the EFCC and the ICPC, they are supposed to be independent, and so they are doing their own part. But beyond what they can do, there is much they can do without that support, that body language from the president, allowing them to do what they are supposed to do, in terms of the fight against corruption. Yes.
So recently, the Center for Fiscal Transparency and Accountability Watch released your index. First of all, how was it received by agencies and departments that necessarily didn't do well?
Yeah, I will approach that from two, angle. Yeah. Since we released that index, we initiated the index in 2021. There have been progress in terms of MDA's performances. In the first year, the highest ranked organization was 33.4. It moved to 57.8 thereabouts.
That's good.
And then this year it was 73.8 thereabout, and so there has been some progress in terms of citizens, in terms of MDAs willing to share information, put this information in their public space, which is the spirit of that index. It is actually anchored on the principle of proactive disclosure, and it's released to mark the UN International Day for Access to Information. And so, yeah, MDAs have been making progress. Of course, the top have been improving, like we have with the issue of the rich in Nigeria getting richer, you know, and then the poor getting poorer.
Right.
And so those in the top categories have been getting better, you know, in terms of course, Development Bank of Nigeria retained its position, its first position, you know, this year. It was the highest last year, and then it came also top this year as well. And so the top categories have been doing well. Then the mid-range, especially the ministries, the core ministries, have not really been doing well. And of course, the low categories who have remained where they are. And so it's a work in progress. The spirit behind that project is just to get more MDAs to disclose information. Information enhances transparency and accountability. When there is information, citizens can ask questions, you know, which is one of the ways corruption is being fought. When there is availability of information, for instance, not many people actually are aware of the budget figure for this year. Not many people are aware of the fact that a so amount was budgeted to repair or to renovate or construct the vice president, you know, office and all of those things. So because they are not aware, they cannot demand accountability.
Right.
And so we are simply saying that if you budget, for instance, you know, 15 billion or 20 billion for XYZ project, put it up there in the public domain. That is the spirit behind the index. And we have been making progress, you know, over the years. Yes, we are working with the Bureau of Public Service Reforms, which is the lead agency for reforms in the public service. And so because of that, we have been able to penetrate agencies to buy into the spirit of the project. And so their buy-in has been commendable over the past years. And of course, they have been participating in the launch, asking questions on how to get better. Of course, some of them.
That makes me really feel really good. That there's even agencies that want to get better.
Yes,
because the impression a lot of them give, I'm not even saying, they give the impression that they don't even care about this. I'm a journalist. Very often when you approach them for information that should be in the public, they shut the doors in your face. So I'm happy that there's improvement to the extent where they really want to participate and share.
Yes, most of them, not most of them anyway, some of them.
I'm happy you corrected yourself there.
Some of them reach out to us, you know, at the course of our assessments to say, how can we get better?
Right.
What is required of them? And we tell them, and some of them go ahead to, you know, release those information in the public domain. You know, the constraint on our part is the fact that we don't have enforcement power. And so even if you make a false declaration, a false publication on your website or your public portal, we cannot take it on from there. So we expect the media to feast on some of this information. We also expect the government, you know, who are the agencies of government who are responsible for the fight against corruption to actually, you know, feast on the information you put out there, you know, and say this information you put is not correct. So we also getting to that point of actually assessing the information some of these agencies are disclosing in the public domain. So the index, the Transparency and Integrity Index, has been a work in progress. Currently, we are trying to expand to Africa. We launched the first index in Liberia this year. And of course, they are making progress with the index. In the coming year, we are hoping to expand to several other African countries. Right. Currently, my organization is also at COPS, that is the Conference of State Parties to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which is currently ongoing in Atlanta. And so one of the things we are advancing at COPS is how to measure corruption, you know, using the TII as a case study. We'll be making a presentation, you know, to world leaders on how the index
TII means Transparency
and Integrity Index. Yes.
Right.
So we'll be making a presentation of that index on how it has helped to measure corruption and of course the reduction of same in the public service. And so we are making progress with the index, and we hope to, you know, make more progress especially with the organization at the mid and bottom category who are not doing much.
Very well.
Yeah.
You talked about the role of citizens in this transparency and accountability of in governance. However, let me just cite an example. The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Honorable Minister budgeted or proposed the 15 billion naira budget for the construction of the Vice President's new lodging or residence, and there was backlash. A lot of people condemned that and thought it was outrageous, especially at a time when Nigerians are having suffering economic challenges. It could have been put into so much more better. That money is too much and all that. That is the citizens' response to budgets that was exposed. That's even those who had the time to even look at it.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying now is, so what? They respond. So what? They react. So what? The citizens. What else can the citizens do? Who else should they go to? Because after that, nobody's talking about it any longer. We've moved on from it, and that's it.
Yeah, there are several ways the citizens can participate in the fight against corruption. One, of course, is getting informed in order to react, in order to make some of those demands like they are making, of course, which also leads to demanding for accountability and transparency in governance processes. The other thing I want to mention, ways the citizens can actually, participate in the fight against corruption, is through election. It's through election. And so with your vote, you have the power to elect those you think can fight corruption. Those you think can listen to you. And so if we have a minister who, of course, there was a public outrage for budgeting so amount of money for the construction, of Vice President Lodge, and there was no heeding, there was no nothing on the part of the government to revisit the matter, but it was just thrown away, as another public outrage. So you have an opportunity in the next 4 years to review the performance of this person.
Right.
And that is why we say that elections have consequences. An election, leadership selection process is one of the ways we can adopt in changing the system. And so this, if this person, or by proxy, the person that appointed the person, is not willing to listen to you, you have your votes in the next 4 years to decide whether you want to retain this person or not to retain the person. But like I said, beside questioning some of this figure, part of the thing we should also be looking out for is the implementation processes. And of course, e-procurement is one of the things that is being discussed at the Conference of State Parties currently ongoing. How do we make the procurement process more transparent? How do we get citizens to be more involved in the procurement process? And so if the procurement process of this money, that has been voted to construct the Vice President office is transparent, and people see how the money is expended, then we can also say that we are making progress.
Exactly.
And so it is one thing to budget a huge amount for a particular project. It is then another thing to ensure that the money was actually used for that project. And so they are two different things. And now there was an outrage because that money was voted for, which is fine.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Then the other layer of it is that people should be involved in how the money was expended. So if we are satisfied with the way the money is expended, then we are making progress. Of course, we should cut cost of governance, which is valid, but again, there are certain things that are beyond what the citizens can do. Another way, again, the citizen can participate, in the governance process, especially in terms of the fight against corruption, is participation in what they call public hearings
and town hall meetings.
That
is when you are invited now.
Well, you should be interested first. How many Nigerians are willing to go to the National Assembly to be part of a public hearing for a bill, for instance? So we have to come to that point where we have informed citizenry who are interested in the system, who want to participate, in what government is about. This budget will actually also be subject to, approval by the National Assembly, and we elect people who are representing us at the National Assembly. So if we want a change in that figure of the budget, for instance, we can still do it, regardless of whether the minister or whoever actually voted that amount is responding to our cry or not. We can go through our elected representative to say, this money that has been voted, do not approve it. Right? So there are
ways that one can
there are quite several channels where citizens can actually channel, their voices through, in order to get government to do the right thing. But like I said, voting election is one of the best way. Hearing through your elected representative who actually check the activities of the others, So
now, civil society organizations and human rights activists are very important in the fight against corruption, or the anti-corruption fight. How would you say this government engages with and collaborates? I was just really happy that you said it has improved significantly, but how would you say where would you say we are when it comes to engaging with civil society organizations and all of that for the betterment of our country?
Yes, one thing I must first mention is the fact that civil society organization, government actually sees civil society organization as troublemakers.
But are you? Nigerian civil society organizations, are you?
We are not troublemakers.
because it also confuses some of us. Sometimes we see civil society organizations come for what the government is, policies of the government. We also see civil society organizations go against. And so if I am at the helm of affairs, I probably will be asking, okay, if I have to take these people seriously, where do I go?
Yeah, of course. I was going to come to the fact that we need to harmonize our approaches. We need to actually sanitize the way we engage, so there is the feeling, by governments, anything government, that civil society organizations, players are looking for problems. They want to just expose chaos, you. They want to, make the people, go against your policies and all of that. But honestly, that shouldn't be. And one of the approaches that must be adopted, even as civil society player, is the co-creation, the open government partnership. Right. Very, very important. We must be willing to co-create ideas, projects with government and implement, and that is what we are doing with the Transparency and Integrity Index. We are actually working with the Bureau of Public Service Reforms, a government agency, to see how government agencies can buy into the spirit of that project, and which is very, very important. So institutions of government must realize that we are here to support their work. We are here to make their work more easier. And civil society organization must at the same time also realize that government is not an enemy. Yeah, we are not seeing them really as an enemy. So we must co-create ideas together and implement. And so the government, like I said, the current government is doing a lot in terms of reaching out, not seeing us as enemies. I just told you that we had an engagement with EFCC chairman. Another one is coming up with the ICPC chairman this morning. And so these are some of the ways to actually collaborate, because we have the data, we have the information that you need to even fight your corruption.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we relate with the people, we are like the bridge between the people and those in power. And so we have a lot of information to share, in this fight against corruption, and of course every other area that civil society organizations are involved in. So there should be more collaboration. Collaboration is very, very important if what we do must see the light of the day, if what we do must have impact in the lives of the ordinary people. And of course, our ideology at the Center for Fiscal Transparency and Integrity Watch is to see how we can collaborate with government in most of the things that we do. We have a project called the Public Service Diary. Is a project we develop alongside the Bureau as well, the Bureau of Public Service Reforms. And what we are doing with that project is to create an interface where people who are out of government, retirees, can exchange knowledge of their experience with those who are in active service. You encounter a particular situation while in active service. How were you able to solve it? We facilitate that knowledge exchange between those in active service and those who have retired. And so we are constantly working with government. But again, like I said, government sometimes see civil society people as people who are looking for trouble. Honestly, we are not looking for trouble. We are only interested in how to get the system work.
But you can't understand why, if you are trying to expose something that is not right, you might be perceived as looking for trouble. But let's talk about the international treaties that Nigeria signs against corruption to join against corruption. The top of my head is the UN Convention Against Corruption. We have several others that Nigeria is part of. What would you say appreciable efforts are in implementing some of those treaties?
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Joy, for asking this question. Currently, the world is at COSP, that is the Conference of State Parties 10. It's actually the secretariat that implements the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, right? And so this is the 10th edition. That is why it's called COSP 10. And so actually about 190 nations have signed up to the convention, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. And that convention, let me give a little bit of background, so that you know what it is in the fight against corruption. That convention has about 4 pillars. The first pillar is prevention, how corruption can be prevented from the system. The second pillar is law enforcement and criminalization, how you can criminalize some of the things that happen, the corruption practices that happen. Of course, it mandates nation states, nation party, to legalize, to actually churn out laws that criminalize corruption and, of course, law enforcement. The third pillar is international cooperation, which is very, very important. There is issue around asset recovery, which cannot happen, which, of course, is the fourth pillar, if there is no international cooperation. We have been hearing about repatriation of Abacha loot, right, and, of course, every other loot, out there. It cannot happen when there is no international cooperation. That is the third leg of that, convention. The last, which I just mentioned, is asset recovery. How is it that we have a country, a continent, that our leaders are more interested in packing our loot, dump them somewhere else, and so we need that international cooperation for asset recovery. Good enough, in 2022, President Buhari signed the Proceeds of Crime Act, which is now an act. Of course, it actually dictates how assets can be recovered, of course, locally and internationally. Right. And so the UNCAC is an important instrument in this fight against corruption. Of course, the Secretariat of the UNCAC is the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime, and they have been doing well. Of course, we have partnership, we have been working with them in this fight against the UNODC in the fight against corruption, and of course, they have an office in Nigeria. So, but what I want to say again and again is the fact that we need the cooperation of everybody, regardless of the convention. Of course, at the review of the convention in 2022, Nigeria had made progress, but there are some lapses, especially on the prevention leg, where corruption actually starts. That is where corruption starts. If we cannot stop corruption from happening, then every other thing, the cost of actually addressing it is a waste. Is a waste to the country and all of that. And so we must do more in corruption prevention. Right. And this is where the citizens' role come to play. This is where whistleblower, and this is an opportunity to call on agencies of government, to expedite the signing of the Whistleblower Act. Because
there we go again, the Whistleblower Act. I wonder what's going on with that. But recently, that's 9th of December was the Anti-Corruption Day.
Yes.
Again, statements were made and so much conversations, discussions, engagements, summits, conferences to mark the World Anti-Corruption Day. What is different about this year's Anti-Corruption Day? Do you think there is a take back that Nigerians should hold on to?
Yes, this year for us, it's actually marking UNCAC at 20, that is the United Nations Convention at 20, and the theme is United Against Corruption.
Right.
And so it's a call for every one of us to be united in the fight against corruption. For us at the center, we organize a program that involves youth corps members, where we sensitize them on issues on corruption, organized crime. Of course, there was a quiz competition as well for youth corps members. There was a debate. And so we must come to a point where we carry everyone along in this fight against corruption, especially young people who are supposedly the leaders of tomorrow.
They need to understand.
And so the cost of the corruption we are not able to fight today will affect them. And of course, their own future as well. I mean, by their future, I mean their own children as well. So everyone must be united in this fight against corruption. Corruption fight is not the role of the EFCC alone. It's not the role of the ICPC alone. Not even the role of the Code of Conduct Bureau alone. It is everyone's role. And so that is the message for everyone this year, that we should be united in this fight against corruption. If you see something that is not good, talk about it. Regardless of whether we have the Whistleblower Protection Act in place, there are channels. Of course, the AFCC has a channel, iSave or something. I can't remember the name for that particular platform where you can actually report. And of course, some of these agencies are also accessible. You can volunteer useful information that can lead to corruption prosecution. That is your role. That is our role as citizens in this fight against corruption. So the message for this year is we all must be united in this fight against corruption. It is not the duty of government alone. It is all of our responsibility, to see that the nation, grow and develop as it should be.
Victor Agi, thank you so much for being part of this. It's always very wonderful to talk about anti-corruption with you, because you're doing so much in that regard. And more grease to your elbow. I hope that we see a corruption-free nation at some point. Would that take you out of business?
Honestly, I'll be proud to go out of business.
Yes, of course.
When there is no corruption.
No corruption to expose. Well, yes. Thank you so much for what you do and for being part of ASU Morning this morning.
Thank you very much, Joy, for having me.
Right.